So welcome to Transform Gov. It's the Digital Government Podcast, and it's part of the Ireland eGovernment Awards, and it's brought to you in association with our partner Accenture. I'm Maeve Kneafsey, and on today's episode, we're joined by Richard Corbridge, a digital leader who has worked across health, retail, government, and now industry. And in fact, you might actually remember Richard because he had quite a bit of time with eHealth, which is part, as you know, of the HSE. And before he left there, he in fact won an award with the Ireland eGovernment Awards. In 2017, he was awarded the Visionary Award. So Richard, you're very, very welcome to Transform Gov.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, look, today, Richard, I want to speak to you about not just kind of big systems and strategies, but about important stuff like people and the lessons you've learned, not to mention, you know, your own personal love of vinyl, which I found out about you, but we'll have to talk about that later. So in terms of what is shaping public sector leadership here in Ireland, you know, I want to kind of dig into your own journey. And you moved from health, as I said, to retail, and then the Irish and the UK public sector, and now in the private sector. What has stayed with you in terms of being a constant, if you like, in terms of your approach, no matter where you are?
Well, it's a lovely inroad, isn't it, as a question? I think what I've taken from working quite frontline in the NHS, actually leading a big hospital in the UK, Leeds Teaching Hospital, and then out into the HSE, in particular from those two, and then trying to expand on it more, is that people first element, what we're trying to do. Whilst we are technologists, digital professionals, whatever the tag is that we do, you keep coming back to technology in 2025 is there to answer problems, to help fix needs, and it's not tech for tech's sake. And that's becoming actually quite harder to resist in this year, I would say, with the sort of the proliferation of AI, the conversations around AI, and to some degree the consumerization of it. Like when my parents are asking about AI, when my children are asking about AI, you know that this is no longer the purview of just technology people or people trying to do transformation. It's become so prevalent in everything we do that we've got to find a way to always go back to that people first element of what we do.
Okay, and I presume when you mean people first, we're not just talking about the citizen, we're actually talking about the person delivering the service as well. Is that what you mean by the people first approach?
Yeah, so whether it's citizen, patient, customer, it doesn't kind of matter. That's why I use the word people first, really, is it's about whoever is needing the service and whoever is delivering the service. So when we talk about healthcare, we always used to have a bit of a conundrum about who is the customer of IT in the HSE. Is it the patient? Is it the clinician? Or is it the administrator? They're all people. They're all human beings that need problem solving, and technology is at its absolute central point to be able to solve those problems. And therefore, people first to me really does mean that we're trying to make sure that we put our arms around the problem in a way that colleagues or clinicians or patients feel that they can lean in on technology people for probably the first time really in a good while, that we can have that type of conversation. And
if we go back a little step to your time with eHealth, you know, in Ireland at the HSE, is there anything in particular you took away from that? Maybe the thing you're most proud of in terms of your contribution to eHealth in Ireland?
I mean, 4 years there, it still remains the best job I've ever had in my career, was the 4 years in Ireland.
That's brilliant.
I took loads and loads of things away. Relationships and friendships. I think the way that Tony O'Brien had that period of time when eHealth Ireland was at its absolute vanguard, and the support that was given to the transformation of the healthcare system through the use of technology for a period of time was amazing. And to be able to take some of those learnings and apply them to other big transformations, sadly, you know, money, budget, funding is not always there. And therefore, you know, one of the reasons that we floundered a little bit was that you needed more money than perhaps was actually available to us to do some of the things we wanted to do. And being able to make sure that you can understand the priority and the necessity of what we were trying to do was a big piece in there. But I think, you know, the different engagement ways that we got eHealth Ireland off the ground, for me, that's something that I've tried to replicate, whether it's, you know, the events that eHealth Ireland ran, the engagement with schools, with universities, with patient groups. The eHealth Ireland board was a phenomenal experience with all those external experts helping try and drive forward what could be done in healthcare. So just so much really positive experience from those 4 years.
And interestingly, when you talk now about what your experience was, it's people, isn't it? I mean, you're not talking about some amazing technology. You're saying, well, I got the people who needed to be around the table. So how do you move, I suppose, towards really engaging people, both the user and the provider, in a real way, rather than it just being about strategy? Is it about creating, moments where people can network and talk to each other and answer and solve problems?
I think there's something about keeping it simple, that translation. I've been saying for a little while now that the role of a good digital professional is part translator. It's taking that tech speak, that difficult to understand language that is about technology, is about tin and wires, is about the language, the coding, the way it works, and turning that into something that a colleague can understand that is centered on their problem, the thing that you're trying to resolve. And being able to do it both ways. So not only taking the tech to the colleague, but also taking the problem to the tech. As a leader in what we do, for me, that feels like the key skill, the key thing that we can do. And again, with all the new technology that's really coming to the forefront now, it's harder to do because there's lots of people who believe they understand the technology because we have consumerized what we wanted. I remember a few years ago saying the thing I wanted most was colleagues across healthcare to be talking to me about what I do, my role, my professional role as a technologist. We're now in that place where that is happening, and you have to be a bit careful what you wish for, because now we've got colleagues talking about technology first rather than problems and patient care and what we need them to do. It's a fascinating turn of events.
Well, that's interesting. We're going to go back to that, but I suppose to kind of think about the change in the role really that you're talking about, which is where the CIO, let's call it the CIO, could be the digital lead, is that glue between kind of building technology and actually solving the right problems for the right people at the right time. So I know I've heard you talk about this before, but do you feel that role is recognized and it's not just stuck in the basement, as I've heard you call it before? Is the role of CIO or the digital lead being pushed up really to the top table?
Not enough, and it's taken a long time. So I've been doing this stuff for 25 years, and we have gone from being in the basement next to the dusty bits of paper to having, a seat at the table in many, many cases. But in many organizations, the CIO is still reporting to the CFO or the chief operating officer, doesn't have a voice at the table. And I think in those organizations, you can see when the board, the exec team, the leadership start to flounder with their understanding of not the tech actually, but what transformation means. So I've been championing in the last 2 or 3 roles now that the most experienced transformation agents in an organization, almost in all cases, will be IT professionals originally. Because to be successful in what we have done for 25 years, you've had to transform businesses, organizations, ways of working, thinking across colleagues. And for me, that means we've inadvertently built a set of skills around how to make transformation happen, which means that you don't need to be in the IT crowd in the basement with the dust anymore, but need to be seen as the catalyst and foundation for change. And I keep using those 2 words quite carefully at the moment because sometimes people are trying to say you one or the other. So is AI the foundation for an amazing change in retail? Maybe, but it's definitely the catalyst for an amazing change in retail as well. So we're now in a place where individual technological advancements can be built upon as a foundation, but are the catalyst for considerations for change.
But I suppose in a way you're taking the IT out of the CIO in a way, although yes, of course, I understand they have to be able to understand how to shift something from a thought into actual reality. But there also needs to be real skill, isn't there, around being able to communicate properly, which is not necessarily what people think of when they think of IT. So there's a different kind of a person, I'm guessing, emerging.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have the credibility from a technology point of view. And there are many CIOs who would argue against me and say that the tech skills are the most important, but you don't become a CIO, in my view, and step up to a leadership role because of your tech skills, your ability to code, your ability to network, your ability to run cybersecurity. You need to have credibility in all of those areas. And sometimes that means experience in those areas, but you don't need to be the person with the fingers on the keyboard doing the coding, or the person running around cabling a new building. And it's a fine line between credibility and becoming too embroiled in the detail. So you may remember, I never did IT, technology, computer science at uni. I trained to be a teacher at uni. And that, for me, meant that as I picked up my career in technology, I had those skills of how to stand in a room and talk to people, to explain things in simple terms, and learned how to code and learned about cybersecurity on the job after the event. I think I have enough tech credibility to hold my own. But my skill, the thing that I pride myself on, is being able to talk to people about problems and help them find solutions.
Well, look, that is a perfect segue to take a very, very short break. We've got important people to thank and a message from our partner, Accenture. So don't go away, back in 2 seconds.
Through the power of cloud, data and AI, Accenture is helping the public sector by blending human ingenuity, technology and a delivery-focused culture to turn their ambitions into action. Be ready for any challenge by adopting a continuous reinvention mindset to deliver human-centric services that adapt and grow with your needs. Contact the team at Accenture to find out more.
So we're back now after our quick break there. And I think it would be very remiss of us both not to kind of delve into AI a little bit, because it's so high on people's agenda, right? In terms of the public sector. Well, I mean, in terms of the world, but particularly the public sector. And I think any practical advice you might be able to give CIOs about, where to start and what to avoid, because I know you've been involved in both sides, if you like, of the camp, the public and the private sector. So what kind of insights would you like to share with CIOs who are working in the public sector and anybody working in digital trying to implement pilots or, in fact, the full thing in terms of AI?
Yeah, I mean, this genie's definitely not going back in the bottle, is it? There's talk of the hype cycle, etc., and I'm sure at some point it will burst a little bit, but it's certainly proving itself in so many ways. I think in my most recent public sector role at the Department of Work and Pensions in the UK, the things that we did was to really stand up a business capability to understand what the art of the possible was. So we created an AI innovation board that was made up of colleagues from across the department who came with problems and spoke to experts in AI and indeed in innovation and got to work together on how you go after problems. One of the things that the civil service public sector has to be a little bit careful of is AIing things for the sake of AIing things. We have a bag of goodies called digital, and AI is one of the things that could be a solution inside that bag of goodies. It's not the answer to everything. At one point, I remember a minister saying to me, I just want lots of AI, not I don't want that problem fixed. It was just get me some AI stuff so I can talk to the media about how cool my AI stuff is. That's quite scary because you're not looking at the problem and trying to fix it. You're just trying to deploy technology, which is something we've spent 20 years trying to stop from happening, that we become just for the sake of it, let's plug some stuff in and go for it. So I think that the two key things are pick the right places to try and use AI and get that business engagement sat alongside the technologists who can do the work so that it feels like it's co-owned and an answer to a problem.
Okay, so as you've always said, probably from my memory, start with the problem and then figure out what technology is going to help you solve it quickly. But there is always that temptation to take a new technology and think it's going to solve every problem. Do you experience that when it comes to Gen AI?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I think we are all jumping to AI to do everything, and you don't need it to do everything. We've started a bit of a sort of team building thing at the moment where we're asking, is AI the only way to fix that problem? So when people come with a startup that they've met at an event, this guy's got a wonderful AI solution. Well, it's automation. It doesn't need AI. It's simple robotic automation, or it's simple, data translation done in a way that uses algorithms in a better way. I think it is the cool kid on the block, and it is definitely going to revolutionize how we offer services and do what we do, but it isn't the only answer. And I keep stressing to my team now here in my organization, remember all the other things in your bag of answers to problems. There are more than just AI in there. I think UK Gov has tried to define RPA, robotic process automation, in that AI bag. And that's been quite dangerous because some of the automation now is being labelled as AI when it's just not. And I think with some of the European legislation and the need to register everywhere where agentic AI is being used, it could end up being actually a bit of a painful thing to go through when you find yourself registering Gen AI solutions to problems that didn't really require Gen AI to be deployed.
And I mean, one of the challenges that we see coming through, we had our leadership summit at the Ireland Government Awards recently, and one of the subjects was moving even from test and pilot use of Gen AI into real, scalable use of AI. Have you seen that happening effectively?
It's hard. It's really hard. I have seen it happen effectively. We did it at the Department of Work and Pensions. We created the capability for optical computer reading to read letters, handwritten letters, typed letters, but open envelopes, read letters and spot vulnerability, and then prioritize the most vulnerable people to the top of the pile to be evaluated on how we get benefits, how we look after those people. We used AI to create the learning, to create the model to allow that vulnerability to be spotted. We used AI to do the reading and spot vulnerability and then keep it learning. There's a very strong business problem, 24,000 letters landing every day, an almost 4-week waiting list for the letter to be evaluated, and people in dire need of help
Richard,
within 24 hours.
Just to interrupt you, are you talking about handwritten letters?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So handwritten letters sent to an opening centre, now opened, scanned, and AI reading those handwritten letters and evaluating the vulnerability described in the letter against a set of learning that was also created by AI, because we're not allowed to use live information to train an AI model. It was unbelievable. And 86% accuracy on go live, 24,000 letters a day now being reacted to within 24 hours. A phenomenal solution.
And can you see real, genuine benefits of the outcome for citizens? What have you seen?
When you've seen citizens get help within 24 hours instead of 4 weeks, there are sort of stories being told that I would go as far as to say we haven't proven, but stories being told about people who were in such dire straits they didn't know which way to turn, and because they were contacted and had help within 24 hours, life-changing, moving from vulnerability of the most awful circumstances to one where they got help from the government in a way that the government is supposed to help these people. And taking that waiting list down from, that level of backlog was just too huge for anybody to contemplate. You knew that people were suffering for 4 weeks when in reality they needed help very, very quickly.
On a practical level, how did you effectively move from, I presume you piloted the service, to go live? Like, how did you even get there?
It was interesting. We did the learning, but we did the learning on live, I guess, in some way. So a pilot it was, but very carefully orchestrated so that it didn't go away for, a year's worth of evaluation. So we went live, having tested the solution and monitored it with the human in the loop still at every point throughout that for a number of weeks, maybe even months, actually. But knowing that it was now doing its job in live and a human was making sure that it wasn't making mistakes, and the accuracy, because of the learning capabilities in there, kept growing and growing. Eventually, less humans testing it, less humans overseeing it, and moving from a human in the loop to a human on the loop, keeping an eye on in a random way what was actually happening in that space. But you're right to call out the pilots element as well. We've seen lots of statistics in the last couple of weeks about how much value big organizations are actually getting from AI, and that productivity leakage. Deploying Gen AI onto the desktop, people are saving 20 minutes a day. But as if they don't do something valuable to the organization with that 20 minutes, then the business case for putting Gen AI on the desktop kind of gets eroded if they can make an extra cup of tea or don't need to run from one meeting to the other. But the working environment's improved. The colleague who's working in that organization feels a bit more valued, a bit more capable. So it's really hard to put a number, a pound and pence, hour and minute, tangible number on the benefit of doing that investment.
It must be quite different for you in terms of what the stakes are very high, aren't they, in public sector to get Gen AI right in that scenario? Is it very different in the private sector?
I think stakes are still very high. You don't want to get something wrong. There will be and have been organizations that fail because they've over-indexed on what AI can do, or they've not tested it appropriately, or they've made some hallucinations and big mistakes that really end up in the public domain and the media. So I think the stakes are just as high at an organizational reputation point of view. I guess in public sector, it's lives, it's humans, it's not profit, it's not product, it's the impact of getting it wrong is immediate and, very, very personal.
And in terms of what you've learned from private sector deployment and just generally, in transformation, do you believe there are learnings that the public sector could really get from private sector in terms of how they transform digitally and obviously use things like Gen AI where appropriate?
Yeah, I think you're stepping a little bit away from AI and more about how does the private sector, my organization now, my previous organization, Boots, how does it govern transformation and change at pace in comparison to public sector? I can compare a piece of work that we did here in my current organization after I joined. We wanted to join the BCS, the equivalent of the Irish Computer Society over here. And in DWP, that took me the best part of 8 months to get through the governance to join an organization which is there to help the professionalization of people who work in digital. It took me about 8 days in the private sector to do that because the governance works. It's meant to be agile. It keeps the organization safe, but allows it to move at pace, make decisions, test and learn, and keep going. The public sector went through a period in the maybe mid-noughties where it understood that and wanted to try and do that. But it seems to have lost its way a little bit. And the bloated nature of governance at the moment in some of the UK public sector technology transformation is quite soul-destroying to look at, actually. You can see that will of my peers and colleagues to do good faster is still there, but for some reason the fear of getting it wrong is so high. And maybe that is things like the Horizon post office scandal and many other well-documented media elements where failings happen and people are just very nervous of ending up in that space.
And do you think there's things that could be done that would actually make that easier for the public sector? I mean, I know that during COVID there was a lot of, I suppose, speed that had to happen and maybe the governance just let things go through in an easier way. But then when I've spoken to people since then, they said maybe things shouldn't have gone through as quick, but they just had to. So I know there's a balance there, but is there any advice you'd give to some our public sector in terms of trying to make that governance element not so onerous?
I mean, how did we lose it? How did we lose the lessons we learned and the things that we did so well? And perhaps more so than anywhere else in health and technology, we did so much in such a short period of time. We didn't break anything. We tested, we learned. Sometimes we had to change and move again and again, but nothing fell apart. And we created some amazing solutions to some horrific problems. So how did we lose that learning? How did we forget that period of time when we did it in that way? I'm not sure I subscribe to the too many things got through. I'm not sure I could point to anything that got through that caused damage. Anything that got through quickly that wasn't perfect was fixed. My old boss, when I was at Boots, used to talk very much about not letting great be the enemy of good. And actually, let's get the solution that is good and then make it deliver value and benefit and make it great over time where necessary. Let's not try and make everything gold-plated and great. Let's actually improve every day the services that were deployed. And that felt like what our goal was during the pandemic was, today, I want it to feel slightly better than yesterday. Not in 6 months' time, the whole thing needs to be better. But let's make each thing slightly better so that we're on a journey of improvement, not on a journey where we'll come back and see you in 6 months.
In fact, that's not dissimilar to how technology used to be done before we started doing agile development, wasn't it? Where everything had to be perfect before it went live and it took forever to go live and it just was a nightmare. But over time, just incrementally making something better. I mean, obviously you've got to have a basic good governance, right? But not impossible that you're trying to have perfect. It's never going to be perfect.
Definitely. I think it's, for me, we put pharmacists onto the NHS 111 phone line and we did it in less than 6 days between 3 or 4 very big organizations with lots of public and private sector governance. We did it that quick because we knew it would help patients who were at home, and the NHS 111 was flooded with calls seeking advice. And it got better and it got better and it got better rather than it being, done in 3 months' time when actually the need may have even gone away by then.
In a bad way. And just in terms of, this brings me to skills and people and trying to find the best people and attract them to the public sector, because all the skills we're talking about, Gen AI, cybersecurity, and all of the things that we worry about needs really good people. but it's not always easy for the public sector to compete. But do you think there are ways in which the public sector can attract more talent, or or even build their own talent, develop their own talent?
There is definitely something about building talent, isn't there? I think you have a calling to work in public sector. You want to be able to see that you've delivered good, that you've done good for your fellow human, and being able to increase the ability for services to be delivered, to do better for taxpayers and that side of it. I think that there's this, I genuinely do believe, a somewhat incorrect perception that the public sector can't afford the talent. I think there are plenty of people that want to work in technology and make a difference. There are 2.1 million people working in IT in the UK. That's an extraordinary amount of people that do IT jobs, whatever that might mean. And many of those people, I am sure, want to be at work to do good, to improve services, to learn. And I think the other thing the public sector sometimes misses a trick on is the learning environment of doing technology in the public sector is huge. At DWP, you could be in the digital team and do 20 years of different jobs and careers across without leaving the organization and learning constantly. Anybody who's a fan of new challenges and learning could look much, would be wise to look at a public sector role and the environment that you can learn and work in.
And have you seen programs that you think we could adopt here that can accelerate that kind of not just attraction, but actually training and bringing people through to higher skills levels?
I think there's sort of the new technologies at the moment are quite generational leveling. There isn't a age group that knows this new tech and an age group that needs to learn it. Everybody's on a learning journey together. So I think there's something about that. Let's embrace that. Let's look at how do we look at new entrants into IT that are perhaps had careers previously and bring them into that role and work together to learn. I think there's something really strong about how do we try and break down some of those generational elements to technologists, particularly leadership technology roles. When I look around my peers in public sector and indeed in private sector to some degree, it tends to be men, it tends to be over 45, it tends to be white. In 2025, that's not okay. And I think it's time that we really found ways in the UK and in Ireland to embrace that diversity and that generational gap and go after that as a way to fixing some of the skills gap that we all have.
Yeah, and in fact, it's interesting because the person who won our visionary for this year is a woman called Louise Jevons, who's CIO of the Department of Justice. And, her journey is probably a testament to that whole idea of coming into an organisation, getting a chance to be through the public sector, go and study in Trinity College Dublin, but then worked her way up the whole way through. And I think there's a lot more opportunity to do that for people in the public sector if it attracts the right people in the first place, right?
Yeah, I think that's true.
In terms of, looking down into the future, what do you hope the public sector in Ireland and in the UK is going to look like in about 5 years? Maybe less, 3.
Yeah, I think it has to be less now, doesn't it? The pace of change is really driving us to plan much more nearer time. I think my hope would be that decisions are made with data, that citizens, patients sort of give information once and it's reused across their system to improve their care, the services they need, that citizens don't need to understand the structure of government to engage, so that if I need help, I can shout, I need help, and the government organisations, the public sector will come to help me. Currently, I suspect in both countries, it's on me to work out how UK government, Irish government works in the different departments and go and flag myself to the many different departments to seek the help that I need to get. And I don't just mean benefits in healthcare. It might be help with my passport and my driving license, help with my education and access to a university. We have created a system that's very disjointed and doesn't share. And that is now to the detriment of our citizens.
And of course, the cost that involves as well, right? There's replication that can go on all over the place. But look, in terms of you and your career, what are you doing now, and how are you getting that the elusive life balance?
What am I doing now? So I'm the CIO of an organisation called Segro. Segro is a property company across the UK and Europe, building and looking after logistics buildings across 9 different markets, 9 different countries. I've been here 12 months. I'm loving it. It is largely based in London, so spending a lot of time out of Yorkshire and in London, which is is okay. It's necessary, and it's part of being in. I'm in our amazing office just off Savile Row today, and it's just brilliant to be back around people and colleagues working on problems, standing at a whiteboard, chewing the fat on how to fix things. I'm loving that side of it. We're still involved a lot across public sector, trying to advise on professionalisation of digital roles through the British Computer Society, and working with Leeds University, trying to help define what computer science degrees of the future looks like.
And does your record collection allow you to keep some sort of perspective? Is that a big part of your life?
Slightly scary, actually, I suppose, my record collection, I'm sure. As we went into COVID, I think there was sort of 80 odd pieces of vinyl in that record collection, and we're now looking down the barrel of about 1,000 records, which I'm sure keeps the house warm in winter as they're stacked up against the wall.
It's a unique form of insulation. And is there particular kinds of music you like to collect?
Most music, actually. About the only sort of music I don't really listen that much to is sort of the heavier end of rock, sort of heavy metal. I've made it a bit of a mission to collect everything by Prince and everything by various other artists. So the completer finisher element in me is probably costing us more than it ought to, as I buy records that I know probably aren't amazing, but they're the one record that's missing out of that artist collection. I think I still go back to some of the sort of Nick Drake and people like that to really enjoy and relax to. But we've just come back from a week in Ibiza as well, listening to lots of dance music and enjoying a boogie. So a bit of everything.
Oh, look, it just sounds like a true collector, right? You've got to finish out the collection. You'll have to have that record, right? Listen, thank you so much, Richard, for joining us today. It's been really, really interesting and in a way inspiring. And I'm so glad that you still have that connection with us in Ireland. And it's great to hear what you're up to now.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, and have a great day, everyone.
Oh, good luck. And look at the rest of your journey. Best of luck. And I want to thank, of course, the fantastic team here in the studio before we go. Studio manager Peter Rice, our video editor Neil Horner, our sound engineer and videographer today, which is Lee Brennan, and of course to the Studio South Dublin podcast studio. So see you all soon on the next episode of Transform Gov. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.